All right, everyone. Welcome into the Voice of College Basketball. Yes, this reminds me of when I actually cared about this sport. We got Michigan State and Duke on the hard court. And don't they know that we've got a watch party and a call-in show to get to? They go to overtime. Hit a 3 at the end of regulation, folks. Sparty, Tom Izzo, help us out. You haven't won a national championship in 22 years. Are you going to win one this year? Okay. All the respect in the world we have for Tom Izzo and his Michigan State team. And I don't even know who the new coach for the Duke Blue Devils basketball team is now that Mike Krzyzewski's hung it up after 40 years. Okay, back to football. What counts? College football playoff rankings to be revealed soon. So we will do play-by-play with all of you. It is 70-69. Oh, it's Kentucky. It's Kentucky. I don't even know who's playing. I thought it was Duke and Michigan State. Okay, it's Kentucky and Michigan State. Kentucky. Yes, John Calipari. I will tell a story now that I've got one connection to this game or these two teams would be that, well, I can think of two connections. There was a Michigan State basketball player, Jamie Fike, who hailed from Lexington High School in Ohio, who I covered and called his games. I did high school basketball play-by-play back when I was just out of college. And Jamie Fike was a top player that went to Michigan State. And so then when he came back and Michigan State played in Columbus against Ohio State, we went to cover Jamie Fike's game at Michigan State and interview him and so forth to do a story after the game. So just as a fun thing, I was a news guy at the time. Just as a fun thing, I went with a sports guy from our station to go talk to Jamie Fike since I had covered him in high school. Then my connection to Kentucky, let's see, would be I did interview John Calipari once when he was the head coach at UMass at the Final Four. I covered the Final Four in 1996, and Kentucky was there and eventually won the national championship against Syracuse. Yes. I was there covering Mississippi State. All right. Back to football. And let's hope we don't have double overtime. Let's hope no double overtime. Don't want it. We want to get the rankings. We want to get your calls in. And then we want to get to it. While we're waiting, we might as well get your calls in now. But before we do that, we want to remind everyone to please use the Amazon link that we provide in the description section. I'm getting too used to wearing these glasses. I don't like them. But I haven't worn my contacts in months. Use the Amazon link in the description section of all the videos right here at the Voice of College Football. Please do that. And, of course, check out all our team live streams that we present each and every day. On Monday, that's Nebraska and USC. We also did a Nebraska show tonight, along with Iowa, of course, on the Iowa channel. We've got a big day on Wednesday each and every week with Ohio State, Oklahoma, Michigan, Florida State, and Miami. It's another Miami show on Thursday night and West Virginia Live right here on Friday night. Please subscribe to the channels that are under 1,000 subs. Even if you don't like the team, if you support what we do here at the Voice of College Football, so that would be the likes of Texas A&M, Penn State, West Virginia, and Georgia are close. Those are the closest to 1,000. Texas A&M, Penn State, Georgia, and West Virginia. Please subscribe. Let's push that West Virginia channel past 1,000. Let's do that tonight. We should have 300 or 400 folks on here tonight. So let's get everybody on over to the West Virginia channel. Please subscribe there and push us over 1,000 subs. I'm going to drop the link in the chat, and we might as well take calls until we get the ranking show on the air. So I've just dropped the link in the chat, so please grab the link and join the show. Appreciate you being here. Now we've got 71-69, and I hope Michigan State does not have the ball. Michigan State's already lost a game this year. But that's Tom Izzo's way. They lose the games in the non-conference season, and then they rev up toward March Madness. That used to be Michigan State's way when I paid attention. Super chat coming in. Appreciate that. Super chat coming in from Don. Chances Harbaugh interviews for the Colts job. Well, maybe one Jeff Saturday is going to hold on to that after the big win that they had against the Raiders. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, Nick.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Just waiting for this game to obviously be over, even though I know college basketball is clearly your number one sport. But no, I'm just kidding.
I like college basketball, or I used to like college basketball. I just don't have time for it, don't care about it. It's just completely, when something leaves my life, it's just gone. It's just gone. I used to know a lot about college basketball. I used to really keep up with it, but I don't even think I've watched a national championship game in close to 10 years.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I just I don't know one player. I don't know the last time I knew a college basketball player.
That's fair. That's fair. I love March Madness so much just because you have we talk about how crazy college football Saturdays are, which they are. I mean, so many unexpected things happen in games, and, you get teams like Iowa who their defense just somehow keeps scoring touchdowns at a rate I've never seen before. But anyway, enough about college basketball. Real quick, I wanted to get into – I have a couple questions for you. Do you think Notre Dame has a realistic shot at beating USC?
Yes, absolutely.
Are you kind of leaning towards Notre Dame?
Well, they're playing better football, and they've certainly been tested against much better teams. USC's schedule has been atrocious. They haven't played anyone yet, except for Utah. They haven't beaten anyone yet. I should be more specific. Not that I don't think USC's a good team, and I do think that they're probably a better team than Notre Dame, but not by much. And Notre Dame's probably a more physical team and certainly a better defensive team.
Okay. Yeah, I think they're going to beat them. I mean, that'll pretty much put a pin in the Pac-12 as far as the college football playoff. I kind of think their chances went down with Oregon. And by the way, does Oregon and Washington, do they know how to play defense?
Not much. Actually, I think Oregon does. Oregon's got a pretty good defense, but it just turned out to be one of those games. It was only 37-34.
Yeah, Michael Penix, though. I mean, that dude, I don't know about you, but his arm talent is, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Without the injuries, I would love to see what his NFL draft stock would be if he didn't, get all the injuries.
His arm talent is it just looks different. He can throw at different angles. He flicks it. He fires it. He throws crazy passes out there. And I stop myself at times to think, does it look that good just because it's left-handed and just looks different? But I think it's legit.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is kind of funny. A lot of like left-handed things end up like looking like uglier for some reason. Like, I don't know if you remember Tayshaun Prince, like left-handed shooting jump shooters.
Tayshaun Prince, Kentucky, right?
Yeah, he was in Kentucky, but he played for the Pistons or Manu Ginobili for the Spurs. Like, they were left-handed shooters in their elbow. It just looks really ugly.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's interesting.
But a left-handed baseball swing is beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't really watch baseball that much, so I guess I wouldn't know.
That used to be my favorite sport. Griffey, Will Clark. Oh, yeah, left-handed baseball swing. Jim Edmonds.
My friends, I only know, like, the big players. I haven't really sat down and, I guess, like, focused on it. I initially liked basketball in general more than football, but then I just plopped myself down one night and forced myself to watch the Ravens on Monday Night Football, and eventually just saw enough craziness where it was interesting. Anyway.
How long ago was that?
Oh, this was back when Ray Lewis was playing.
Okay.
Maybe 2000. I was in, like, early middle school.
Yeah,
something like that.
That doesn't answer my question, but that's okay, Nick.
Well, I don't know
like
how
what
long
year.
ago.
What year are we talking about? Like, I don't know how old you are.
Well, I was born in '93.
It's like
So
okay, so this is like 2005.
yeah, right
Yeah.
around the time when the Panthers went to the Super Bowl,
Okay.
something like
Oh
that.
three.
So,
All right.
yeah, around that time. So I was pretty young, but um, anyway, so here's the interesting thing. If Notre Dame really finishes out this season well, it's almost going to kind of flip Ohio State hasn't played anybody, that narrative on its head, especially if they beat USC, finish out the season well. Do you think that could be a big factor for Ohio State's resume if they happen to lose close to Michigan?
I believe in the results and the facts. And the facts are that Notre Dame lost to Marshall and they lost to Stanford. But it's also reasonable to think, number one, that Notre Dame came into this season with a really good football team because they had a really good one last year and they were supposed to be really good this year. And they laid it all on the line against Ohio State. They played their hearts out and they should have been able to bounce back the next week. That's what everyone's expected to do. You've got a scheduled game the next week and play Marshall and beat them, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And it took them a while to recover. I believe that this is the truth, that they laid it, that the team that lost to Ohio State was not the team that played Marshall and played some other teams. Now they did lose to Stanford later in the season. That's a complete mystery to me.
And they did have a different quarterback.
Yeah, they lost their starting quarterback, Tyler Buckner, and Drew Pine is
more experienced.
At this point, he's, pardon me?
More experienced.
Is he really more experienced?
Well, I mean, he's just wasn't. I thought I saw Drew Pine play. We've seen him play before.
Buckner was the guy that played in relief of Cone last year. Like Jack Cone was the starter, but they were bringing Buckner. Though? Buckner played like a J.J. McCarthy kind of role last year.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. My bad.
So anyway, so I don't want to oversell Notre Dame because their losses are bad and they have to be accountable for them. And the Stanford game isn't that long ago, but they have blasted the two teams playing in the ACC championship game by 3 scores each. And they're just better. They're a pretty good football team.
Do you think UNC has any shot if they take down Clemson?
I would like to think so. I would think that would be a fun debate to have. I do think that they should be considered, but their resume right now is so bad.
Yeah, it's looked terrible.
It's awful. I laid out a video with the 10 teams that I thought had resumes to be considered that were on the bubble, and they by far were the lowest ranked team that I placed because their best win before last week was Duke and Pitt. And now it's Wake Forest, who's 6-4, who's an okay team, but not.
Yeah, so like the only two teams I think that will likely have a shot. Now, we did see the committee kind of admit last week with their rankings that they initially ranked TCU way too low.
Exactly.
In the first rankings. So we know that they're willing to like bump teams up a ton of spots, or that's at least something you got to watch out for.
Yeah.
But besides Tennessee, USC, and TCU, I don't see how Michigan and Ohio State playing each other, how like a Clemson or a one-loss UNC, they're so far down in the rankings. I think Clemson's still at 10. Like there's a lot to have happen. I think a one-loss TCU would be out. Obviously, if Clemson loses again, they're out. But even so, if they don't lose again, I still think they're out. So I think it's very possible that TCU loses a game.
You think the Ohio State Michigan loser is going to be in? It sounds.
If I was betting, I would say 60-40, 60%. I don't think so because I don't know. TCU, I haven't really watched many of their games, but they just keep winning. Do you know the rest of their schedule? Like, do they? Because I expected them to lose to Texas, so that kind of shocked me a little bit that they pulled that out.
they've got Baylor this week on the road. Then they've got Iowa State, and then the Big 12 championship game, which is probably going to be against Kansas State.
What do you think are the chances of them?
Well, even though somebody laughed at me the other night when I said that Baylor could beat them, because they were like, Baylor lost by 5 touchdowns to Kansas State. And I looked up the Vegas odds, and it's a pick'em game.
Okay.
Baylor, I don't know what happened last week to Baylor, but in all these other games, Baylor has played as well as just about anybody in the Big 12 is just compacted. I know TCU's 10-0, but there's not a whole lot of difference between all
It's
those.
the Spider-Man meme. They're all every game they're all pointing at each other. You don't know who's going to win.
Yeah. TCU, the results look like domination, but they beat Kansas State by a touch, or they beat Kansas by a touchdown. The Kansas State game, that is the one that probably should have tripped them up, but Kansas State lost both their quarterbacks. And they were losing by 18 points, TCU, in that game. They were losing to Oklahoma State by 17 points. So I think, and now they're coming off a really big high against Texas. And so if we can play psychologist, who knows how they're going to respond to that. Either they're going to be propelled even further from a confidence standpoint, or they're going to have a letdown that they just went to Austin and won a game that they were a touchdown underdog. So I think Baylor's got a 35% chance of beating them.
Okay.
And you can't discount Iowa State. They've got maybe the best defense in the conference, but they just can't score.
Yeah.
They've got a 15 or 20% chance of winning that game. And then they've got a TCU has to beat someone that they've already played, Kansas State. So
well, yeah, and if people were laughing at you for saying that Baylor might beat TCU, then there's no way they can be laughing that Kansas State can't beat TCU.
I don't know if you watched that game, but Adrian Martinez got hurt the first series of the game. They bring in this, can't think of his first name, Howard, the backup quarterback, and he was really good. And they were winning 28-10. And then he got hurt, and the third stringer was lost, and TCU came back and won. But to your point, the committee will do what the committee wants to do, because the week that they lifted TCU from 7-4, they beat Texas Tech, who was 4-5, and it was not an impressive game. They were losing in the fourth quarter. Like how that result lifted them that much, I don't get it, except for what you said, and that's that the committee said, you know what, we underranked them last week.
Which scares me, because it comes down to, I just keep looking at that 6 slot, and I'm like, when they ranked Oregon at 6, I was like, we all know what's happening here. To me, it was just a clear message where we're gonna, likely Tennessee is gonna win out, but we are not putting 2 Big Ten teams in unless we absolutely have to. And it was just hilarious to watch the way that Oregon lost. And I'm hoping that 6 seed week after week just dumps a game, so that you just get to the point where, I guess it would.
Well, what you want North Carolina or Clemson, whoever eventually wins the ACC championship game, to lose before that. And it's it's not likely, but it's not inconceivable.
It's possible.
That North Carolina could lose to NC State. NC State's a good team. That's a pick'em game. That's a toss-up. And then they go and beat Clemson in the ACC championship game to completely wipe out the conference.
If it was as a Michigan fan, if the right scenario was to play out and you just end up with a bunch of 2-loss teams and then a 1-loss Tennessee, a Georgia, undefeated Georgia, and then everybody else just kind of wets the bed here, I still know, I would not pick Michigan now to beat Ohio State in Columbus, just because we haven't won there in forever. And I know that doesn't necessarily relate to this year's game, but it's just going to be an absolute snake pit. And I don't know, these are 18 and 19-year-olds who haven't played in that environment At least not many of them. Our starting quarterback hasn't, so there's probably going to be some wonky things that goes on down there. But I still expect it to be competitive.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Even if we're like, I'm assuming Michigan, it'll be competitive, but Michigan will win. But if the committee, I'm telling you, this is going to happen. I'm almost a little weary of it because I still would like to see Michigan in one last true Rose Bowl. But if the committee has no other choice but to put a one-loss Michigan in, they're going to say, okay, fine, you can get in. Here's your rematch with Georgia. and I am pretty afraid of that, especially with us not having a downfield passing attack.
Yeah, I get that. But this Michigan team's better prepared to play Georgia than last year's team was.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see.
On that, and all sorts of people can laugh at me and can throw that back in my face if they play and it's 44-10. But I'm just saying, I'm not saying that Michigan's going to win. I'm just saying that they're more prepared. I think they're more prepared because they've been there. They were there last year. They're a better team. The offensive line's better. The running game's better. Even the defense is better. They're better.
Well, yeah, and I mean, obviously part of that is because Georgia just lost a tremendous amount of talent, but they're recruiting at such a high level. But
they're almost playing defense as well as they did last year, but not quite.
Yeah, see, that's the interesting thing. I don't think I mean, I think Georgia's defense is good, but they're playing as well as they have last year. But I have to believe that there's a team out there that can at least show that the defense has, a little bit of a drop off or something.
Well,
really,
you don't want the answer to that question, at least from my perspective.
Oh, okay.
I don't think Ohio State and Michigan, I don't think Ohio State's clearly better than Michigan or Michigan than Ohio State, but I think because of Ohio State's capabilities in the passing game, I think Ohio State's the team to beat Georgia.
Well, and you guys have the best player in the country, so Marvin Harrison Jr.
I just think, I think
literally,
Ohio State, if they're healthy in the running game, they're not as good as Michigan, but they're good and not good enough, but they're 80% of Michigan in the running game. And then they're so much better in the passing game and equipped. They've got an NFL quarterback and NFL receivers.
Yeah, no, for sure. Is this Marvin's third year or second year?
This is his second year.
Okay. Yeah, it was interesting. After I saw that Utah game last year, not saying like Utah was a great opponent. I mean, they were really good, but there were still some questions with them. But after I saw Marvin Harrison in the Rose Bowl, I actually just had the thought in my head. I was like, this dude's going to have a better Ohio State career than JSN. And that it's kind of, and it's not really fair to say because JSN has been injured. So, I mean, we don't really know, how that would have played out, but just his talent, I don't know why more people aren't talking about him. Maybe not probably not Heisman level, but just Joel Klatt's been hammering, but if anybody hasn't seen him play, I mean, the uniqueness of his game at his size is, I don't know about you, I've never seen anything like it.
The first time I saw him play was in the Ohio State spring game a year and a half ago, and I instantly thought, this guy's going to be unstoppable. Like he already had the size and the skill set. Like they would run him on a slant, let's say it like from the 8-yard line, and there's no way he blocks out the sun and he's got wingspan, and how are you going to guard the guy? I instantly thought, okay, maybe I'm being somewhat influenced by knowing who his father is, but this guy, yes, he's already an NFL player. Like he just needs reps.
Yeah, he's a first-round pick right now.
It's interesting if they do get JSN back in the lineup that they almost look Marvin Harrison and Jackson Smith and Jigba almost look like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave.
Yeah.
They almost complement each other from a body type and their skill sets the same way.
I think if you guys get a fully healthy JSN back, I really do think you'll see Ohio State playing for maybe not fully back, but a comfort. Like 85%, 90%, just comfortable
Mm-hmm.
enough to actually put weight. I don't know what the last game he played in, but they were saying he wasn't hurt, but you could just tell he wasn't
Iowa.
comfortable.
Yeah.
And whatnot. And he was thinking too much and whatnot, which was tough to watch. You hate to see guys going through pain, but yeah, I mean, if you guys get him back, it's about wraps for making the national title, because I don't think, especially against Michigan, our best corner is DJ Turner. There is absolutely no way that I would have him shadowing Marvin. There's no way. You can't play man on him.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, you're totally right. I'm right there with you that just the overload of great receivers is too much for any secondary. But actually, if you could split JSN's ability into two offensive guards, those would be the two guys that would be the most helpful to the Ohio State offense.
So you're concerned about the offensive line?
Yeah. Yep.
More concerned about rushing or
overall run blocking, but mostly in short yardage situations, and most of the breakdowns come from the interior.
Okay, so what do you think about Michigan's defensive line then, going up against?
Every time I watch Michigan's defensive line, they're lights out. The only game that I thought that they were somewhat marginal from a pass rush standpoint was against Maryland, and that was the first Big Ten game. I thought Talia had time and made some plays downfield, but I wasn't that overly concerned on Michigan's sake. But since then, I think they have arguably the best. I don't think they have the best defense in the country, but I think they're close. I think Georgia has the best defense in the country, and I think Iowa's in the running. But
their interior size defensive line is an athleticism is, I'm not going to say it's on Georgia's level, but it reminds, it's like Georgia-esque.
Yeah.
It's like Chris Jenkins, you plop in two athletic 300 plus guys at DL interior. I mean, that's going to be tough to run the football on them for sure. I do think Mike Morris has another gear that we haven't necessarily seen, and I don't know if he'll reach that with him getting a little. I don't know if he got an injury at the end of the game against Nebraska or whatnot. But I will say this: have you, with your vast knowledge, have you ever seen a player or been impressed with a player just how smoothly a transition from offensive side of the football to defensive side of the football is Mike Sainristil? And I don't know, is there any other player that kind of comes to mind?
Staying with the same rivalry, Chris Gamble would come to mind.
Okay.
You remember Chris Gamble?
No.
That might have been a few years before so he played a long time with the Carolina Panthers in the NFL, but he came up as a wide receiver, and he played on Ohio State's team prior to their 2002 national championship game, and he was kind of like a receiver that didn't see the field a lot. And then anyway, he played an insane amount of plays he played 115, 120 plays in games during their national championship season, because he played both wide receiver and corner, and he turned out to be an NFL corner, and he was ridiculous.
Okay. What was his name again? I'll have to look up highlights.
Look up Chris Gamble. Absolutely.
Chris Gamble.
A long NFL career.
Okay. I'll definitely take a look at him here in a few minutes. And then one last thing, as far as and obviously we're not, the end of the college football season. So, but have you been seeing UConn's been making a little noise?
Yeah, I actually did a little search to look at Jim Mora's comments and look at the game recap from this past Saturday, since they made bowl eligibility. I was kind of curious about that, because I think that's a fun little story to see an NFL coach coached at UCLA, of course, and take a job like that, which I thought was really curious, just to get himself back in the game and back at it. And that shows you how vital coaching is, that somebody that's that good can go somewhere like UConn and lift them from the depths to a level of respectability instantly.
That's going to be interesting to see. I don't know how much more he's going to be coaching. I mean, I think it's seems like more of a passion project. The guy just is probably really competitive and has that itch, but I would be really curious to see where UConn goes from here. So, but yeah, taking down
the program has in the past been decent under Randy Edsel.
Mm-hmm.
They went to a Fiesta Bowl one year. They shouldn't have been there, but they did.
Were you surprised that they beat Liberty? I don't know what you thought of Liberty.
Well, Liberty also beat Gardner-Webb by 1 point, so I wasn't shocked.
Well, hey, anything I could anything to prop up Michigan's non-con at this point is where I'm going to go, especially since we've gotten the brunt of the stick getting pounded over the head about it. And it is kind of interesting looking at LSU's non-con, how I haven't heard a peep about that. But all of a sudden people are saying if they win the SEC, they're going to the college football playoff.
Well, they played Florida State.
Yeah.
And they lost.
We didn't play an FCS school in the non-con, so.
Well, look at it this way, Nick.
I'm mostly joking. I'm not actually like really that serious about this.
If you're supposed to be, here's my thought about comparing like FCS games against like a lousy group of 5 teams.
Yeah.
If you're supposed to be one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country, does it really matter if you're playing the 100th best team in the country or the 130th best team in the country?
No.
It shouldn't. Yeah.
No, which is not a big deal. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, isn't this really? I mean, I can't remember why Michigan backed out of the UCLA thing. I have a feeling it was something to do with COVID, but I'm not sure.
I looked it up. No, I thought it did too, or I thought it. I had a bunch of theories, and I looked it up, and now I forget why. But it was before COVID. It was decided like in 2019. Here we go. Brett McMurphy on Twitter. No, this isn't going to explain why. I looked it up anyway. I forget.
Isn't though like Colorado State traditionally, they're usually a respectable program.
Yeah, it's been quite a while since they were respectable.
Like what?
Anyway, Nick, we've got a bunch of calls.
Oh, okay. Anyway,
here, so I'll let you go.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate the time. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks for showing up. All right, we've got DC XXXXX. Maybe I threw in an extra X. Thank you so much for the super chat there, Penn State fan. Good to have a Penn State fan here. It just seems like in recent years, for some reason, every time I do a Penn State video, seems like nobody watches. Or maybe DCXXXX watches, but like only like 13 other people watch. So Penn State, we don't have a whole lot of Penn State fans around. So DCXXXX, bring in some Penn State fans. I love your and every one of the regulars' dedication to college football. To use an old 70s phrase, just keep on keeping on. We will. That's what we do. Thanks, DCXXX. And thanks to people like you, we will keep on keeping on. You will probably never hear me make that statement, so I will make it because I'm reading your super chat. We will talk to Chad, and I will let all the callers know that as soon as we go to the watch party portion of this, just hang on. We'll keep you on the line. Whoever's on the call, we'll keep you on the line, but we just want to run through, of course, what the selections are, but they take them so long to select. There'll be plenty of time to converse as well. Chad, how you doing tonight?
Pretty good, Mark. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. I just had a couple of things here. I was mainly wanting to talk about Ohio State's running back situation, and my main question was, what is the skill ceiling on running backs as opposed to other positions like quarterback, where it's obviously very high? your quarterback's going to basically determine how good you are in football. How talented does your running back have to be a quality running attack?
All right. I think that's a great question. And I think that's a complicated answer, but I'll do my best. One would be, what style of offense do you run? So if you run 70% of the time, then obviously your running backs are much more important because they're carrying the football 70% of the time. However, if you're running 40% of the time, then you're talking about in a span of 75 plays. And here we've got the top 25. Let's go. Cincinnati's at 25. NC State falls 8 spots to 24. We've got Oregon State at 23, Oklahoma State at 22, Tulane at 21. They dropped a couple spots, 4 spots after losing to UCF. And Oklahoma State went from not rated to number 22, and Oklahoma State beat, I believe, Kansas. Really? Okay. All right. That's fine. So they were at least 26, if not lower, and they jumped up into the rankings. Oregon State jumps up to number 23 after beating Washington State. Okay. All right. Again, I question that. I don't necessarily disagree with it because, again, I know that sometimes my rankings, people look at it and say, why did they jump 2 spots after they barely won? That sort of thing. Well, it's not in a vacuum. UCF at number 20, Florida State at 19, Notre Dame at 18. Washington climbs big, which they should. They're at 17, UCLA at 16. And if anyone's critical here, keep in mind in the Pac-12, you really can't honor head-to-head because UCLA beat Washington, Washington beat Oregon, Oregon beat UCLA, UCLA beat Utah. So there's all sorts of dynamics there that throw out the head-to-head. And I'm going to release some Pac-12 power rankings here soon. But I'm trying to think how that compares to my top 25. But it's somewhere actually pretty close. So these resume rankings actually kind of work. Kansas State's at 15. Ole Miss is at 14. I think they should be higher than that. North Carolina is at 13, Oregon 12, Penn State 11. I've got Penn State higher. I've got North Carolina a little bit higher. I've got them at 12. I've got Ole Miss 3 spots higher. So Penn State moves up 3 spots for beating Maryland. And Ole Miss moves down 3 spots for losing a 3-point game against Alabama. Okay. And let's get to the top 10 here at some point. Chad, I would tackle your question even more, but I just think as soon as I do, we're going to see more teams thrown up here. Who do we got? Let's go. Top 10. Utah at 10. All right. Utah beat USC. They lost to UCLA and Florida. It's a little high for Utah. A little too high, Utah. A lot too high for Utah. They've got a win against USC by 1 point on a 2-point conversion. Otherwise, Utah beat Oregon State, who's a pretty decent team. Clemson at 9. Okay. So Clemson off the Louisville win jumps up 1. Utah beat Arizona State. Who did they just beat this past weekend? They beat, it was Arizona the week before. They beat like Stanford. Okay. That's who they beat. All right. Clemson at 9, Utah at 10. All right. So we've got Alabama at 8. They move up a spot. They're still ahead of Clemson. And so we still have to wrestle around with Michigan, Ohio State, Tennessee, TCU, LSU. So at number 7 is going to be, well, all right, back to the running back position. So it depends on, first of all, what kind of offense you run and your running distribution versus your pass ratio. That would be number 1. Number 2 would be, okay, how good is your offensive line? Because obviously, the better your offensive line, the less good your running backs have to be because they're just running through massive gaps in the line. You need some help from the offensive line. That's all there is to it. You could have the best running backs in the world. You could have Barry Sanders in his prime, and you're not going to move the ball running if you don't have an offensive line to some extent. But if the offensive line isn't great running backs will create push. They'll find holes. They've got good vision. They'll break tackles. The running back position's been devalued by the NFL draft in the last 10 or 15 years, but good running backs are going to turn 2-yard losses into 1-yard gains, and they're going to turn 1-yard gains into 4-yard gains, or they may break what would have been a 5-yard gain into a 50-yard gain. And so just like any other position, there's value to having superior players at the running back position. Let's see what we got here. Georgia's 1. And Ohio State was number 2 last week. They should maintain that position. There we go. Last week, Michigan was 3, and they should keep that spot after they blew out Nebraska. There they are. TCU at 4. Of course, they had a huge win against Texas. Now, the one thing that they may say here, the committee, is that even though Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU are still 2, 3, and 4, that the gap between 4 and 3 is razor close because TCU's picked up another massive win in defeating Texas. And then we got to think that Tennessee is 5. And let's see. We've got LSU and who? Who am I missing?
I think you got it.
Well, no, we've got Tennessee at 5, and we've got 2 other spots, 6 and 7. So that's going to be LSU and
USC, maybe.
USC. There you go.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what we got. I'll be surprised if it's anything different. So, did that pretty much answer your question?
Yeah. Well, the point I was trying to make, I think, was since Ohio State is basically going to be out Mayan Williams effectively until the playoff, if we're lucky, and I don't know what the deal is with Travion Henderson, we are going to be stuck with a mediocre running back.
Yep.
Well, by our standards, yeah. And so my point is
inexperienced running back.
Right. That's the biggest thing. Even with Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson in the 3-week stretch where we weren't able to move the ball against teams like Northwestern, it didn't really matter that we had those elite talents on our team. They're not, top 5, but they're pretty good. We still couldn't move the ball. And so it seems like the offensive line tends to really make the biggest impact. And so when we face a team like Michigan, we're going to probably struggle to run the ball regardless of who's in the backfield.
I agree.
And then another thing, would it be wise then for Michigan to drop guys back in coverage and not even really play the run at all?
If I was Michigan, to start the game until proven otherwise, I would absolutely. I bracket receivers. I would bail on the run to a certain extent. I'd use a very vanilla front 7 at least, disguise coverages and do things with the coverages. But yeah, number 1, even if Ohio State can move the ball a little bit on the ground because of that. So Michigan, takes guys out of the box and let's say commits to stopping the aerial game, that what's the worst that's going to happen? After 2 drives, Ohio State hits, they hit for 8-yard runs and 12-yard runs. And you start to think, okay, well, we can't stop them like this. But the inverse is you get torn up through the air, which obviously produces points typically a lot faster. I definitely would go that route. Just like the inverse, if I'm if I'm Ohio State, Michigan hasn't hit plays downfield. I think they're capable of it. I might be wrong. I think they're capable of it, but they've got the ability, they've got the talent. They haven't executed, nor have they worked on it, at least in games. So if I'm Ohio State, what's the worst that can happen if the first drive of the game you just sell out and say, you know what, we're going to trust our corners to go one-on-one with your receivers, and we're going to load the box to stop Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, and they hit a 70-yard touchdown pass. Well, then you think, okay, we'll bail on that, but you got to prove it first. I would do that.
That's exactly what my next point was going to be, is that it's the exact opposite strategy with Michigan, with Michigan's offense. And I guess another thing I wanted to bring into this is this is just going to be a massive battle, or a massive game of chess between Ryan Day and Harbaugh, in that we don't know if they're planning some secret surprise where they do have a good deep ball connection. Maybe they've been working on, in practice, or what, tricks up their sleeve they have. And I just wanted to say, this is probably the most anticipated game, at least since 2006, but maybe even before that. At least probably in my lifetime.
Well, the difference with 2006 is the winner of the game was going to play in the national championship game. The winner of this game is going to play in the Big Ten championship game, then have to win that, then go play in a playoff to win another game. They got to win 3 games to win a national championship, as opposed to just playing in the national championship game.
Well, I think in a way, it feels bigger than just the national championship. I don't know why. It just feels like the rivalry's back in a sense, even though last year, I don't know if you get that sense too.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great point that you make. So I was thinking in the interim, you were thinking big picture. So well put by you that, the tipping point in the rivalry could be upon us if Michigan wins this game.
Yeah, absolutely. That's all I had. Thanks for taking my call, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chad. Appreciate that. BGPO Football Funk, appreciate you so much being here, and thank you so much for the super chat. And I see that you're waiting, so I'm glad that you were able to make it in. But to Chad's point, I think most college football observers still consider Ohio State the class of the Big Ten, even though they lost the game last year. And I have no issue with any Michigan fan saying, we won the game last year, we won the Big Ten championship, we are the standard in the Big Ten right now. I have no issue with that. But from a more holistic standpoint, I still believe Ohio State owns the series, owns the conference, best recruiting, best roster. They lost 1 game, okay? But they still, now if Michigan wins this game, I will officially, everybody can hold me to this, I will say Michigan runs the Big Ten. They are the number 1 program in the Big Ten. They win this game this year. They've won 2 consecutive games. They've won what we would expect to be 2 consecutive Big Ten championships. Let's not forget they will play a game in Indianapolis against the likes of Purdue, Iowa. I think it's going to be Iowa, actually. I think Iowa's going to run the table and be in the Big Ten championship game. So that's what we're going to have. So that's my thought there. We got Sports Talk 101 on here. Welcome in.
Hey, Mark. Another, you was talking about saying about the Michigan and winning the Big Ten last year and being Ohio State. Anyways, that being said, I think heading to the game against Ohio is a good matchup. But like you said, as you mentioned, Michigan being prepare Iowa, Purdue in the Big Ten championship, win that one, win 10 games to win the national championship. That'll be hell of fun because you have to face up again to like Georgia potentially in the national championship if you were to win out. This game against Illinois and game against Ohio State and how we'll face in the Big Ten championship game. But a rematch versus Georgia will be a much better game than it was last year in the playoffs.
I believe so.
I mean,
I agree with that. Made that statement a few minutes ago. I believe that. We'll have to wait and see.
right. I think that's. But
Michigan's a better team this year than they are last year. They're better at quarterback, even though the quarterback isn't allowed to really show off those skills. If for no other reason, the threat of throwing it downfield and the threat of the run, the quarterback's better. The running back position's better. I've got all the respect in the world for Hassan Haskins, but Blake Corum has made himself better, and he's a more dynamic runner than Hassan Haskins. The Virginia transfer at center, Olobatimi, he's an All-American. He's made the offensive line better. And they're a better defense. Not by much, but I think they're better this year defensively too. They're a better team.
Yeah, and there's, like I said, the offensive line is better than the team that won the offensive line award last year too. And I love Jay McCarthy can run the ball, but one thing I do have concern with Mr. McCarthy, I mean, we have great receivers. And you said earlier too that we have capable. We can throw the ball down, but we just don't do it that often. And
you may want to edit the word "great."
Yeah, but good receivers.
Yeah.
I mean, they're fast receivers. Don't get me wrong, but the deep balls is the one thing he can throw the ball deep ball. That's one thing he's good at. But him and the receiver not on the same page. I've been noticing that the past few games. If you want to be Ohio State, not just a run game, but also you got to work on we got to practice getting throwing the ball. You know.
If I was the quarterback coach at Michigan, which I shouldn't be, I'm not qualified. I am not a quarterback coach, but I would tell J.J. McCarthy one thing. If you keep overshooting these wide receivers downfield, do you know what your completion percentage on those throws is going to be? I can guarantee what it's going to be. It's going to be 0, because if the ball's thrown 3 yards past the guy, he can't catch it. But you know what? If you take something off those throws, and even if they're underthrown, the receiver still has the advantage to come back and catch the ball. So you may want to do that.
I think at least one thing Michigan need to work on heading to the game against Ohio State in a couple of less than a week, because I'd say 10 days. But yeah, I think that's. And you said about Blake Corum, I think he's. If I would say the top 3 to get invited to New York right now, I think Blake Corum is going to be one of those players to be invited to New York. And that's fact. He's probably one of the best running back in the country right now.
Well, if he gets an invite to New York, he better be not one of the best. He better be the best. I personally think, and this is from more of a pro perspective, I'm not saying that this guy is having a better season, but I think Bijan Robinson's the best running back in college football. But Blake Corum is right there. And my top 4 for the Heisman, I think it's a really crowded vote right now. I think you got CJ Stroud, you got Blake Corum, you got Hendon Hooker, you've got Caleb Williams, you've got Drake May now. Who am I missing? Max Duggan, I think, is having an outstanding season.
Right. And I also have similar lists as you have. CJ Stroud, May, Corum, and but if they would send one running back to New York, I think it would be Blake Corum.
I agree.
And then to one quarterback to New York, I'd say that's probably but Drake May, I think, has the better stats than CJ Stroud. But if they were to send one quarterback, I think it's going to be to New York. I think it's going to be Drake May.
All right, Sports Talk 101. We appreciate you being here. Do you have anything else?
Yes. So in terms of the rankings, I'm surprised that Utah was at 10th. I think that's being that high.
Yeah, too high.
That's too high. Utah, lost to UCLA, and then also lost. That's just too high. In the top 5, I think I agree with that. But I think right now USC might have. I think right now at this point, USC might have a high chance as only Big Ten, Pac-12's only hopes of making to the playoffs. So I've only have a question for you. Does a 12-1 Pac-12 champion or a 12-1 ACC champion get in over a one-loss Tennessee or like a one-loss Ohio State?
Well, the USC situation is the only Pac-12 possibility. So the 12-1 USC team, after beating UCLA, Notre Dame, and a Pac-12 championship game, has a better resume, better credentials than a ACC champion.
Right. And then I think and then one more thing, TCU. Let's talk about TCU for a second. I mean, at this point, if you're feeling TCU go to they're in. But if they lose one game and with Big 12, I think they're in. But now like a game against, like I said, Baylor, and then they got Iowa State, and then they got a rematch against Kansas State or Texas, whoever they face in the championship game. And I think TCU, even with one loss, should be in because they go in. Correct?
It all depends on the scenario. Is TCU going to get in with one loss? If USC's got one loss, if Ohio State's undefeated, if the SEC gets two, there are all sorts of situations. So we can't look at this in a vacuum. It depends on what else is going on across the country. Sports Talk 101, appreciate you being here. Call back anytime.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to pick off two calls, and then we're going to go right to Tony and Tim with the Patreon Voice of College Football Community 12-pack. Buckeye Mike, what's going on?
What's up? So
I'm here for you, Mike. What you got?
So first of all, I wanted to apologize for sounding really dumb last night.
I did not come away, Mike. I've had a slew of dumb callers through the years, so you're not on that list. So don't worry about it.
By the way, I tweeted you the link to that article. I did actually find it. I wanted to see if you saw that.
The article to what?
When I was talking about 2008.
Yeah, I don't. You tweeted it to me? Do you DM it to me?
No, it should be on your feed or something.
Okay. All right. I'm sure it's there. Okay. What else you got?
Anyway, so my actual questions tonight. First of all, how does beating Kansas move Oklahoma State up that much?
You got me. Except the caveat you got to understand. So I'm critical just like you. I look at this and I'm like, Oklahoma State, they just lost. They've looked awful for 2 consecutive weeks. Then they beat Kansas, and I got respect for Kansas. They're a decent team. They're like a top 40 team. Yeah. Oklahoma State wins that, and they vault not just into the top 25, but they went to 22. Okay. Also understand, though, you and other people kind of look at one team and say, okay, they beat them. Why are they there? They were there last week. Why did they go from 15 to 18? Believe me, from doing this every week, when you are dealing with everybody, there are certain moves that on the surface don't necessarily seem to make sense, but it's all a puzzle. You're not ranking teams in a vacuum. You're not saying you're number 15, you beat a bad team and you looked awful, so we're going to drop you to 19. No, not if a bunch of teams behind them looked awful and lost games. Well, that number 15, they may actually move up after a ugly win. It all plays together. It's a puzzle. So, but I did agree with you on the surface. I don't have Oklahoma State in my top 25.
Mm-hmm. My biggest question for you that I didn't get to last night, is Georgia becoming Alabama from 2009 to 2020?
Wow. That's funny that you say that, because that went through my mind in some kind of conversation in the last 2 days. I thought, is Georgia the new Alabama? They are the new standard. Let's hold off until they at least win this one.
That makes sense.
Which, of course, Alabama did not do until, which they've never done, right? 09.
What?
11-12. 11-12, they won back-to-back. Okay.
I think they only repeated once,
11-12. Yep.
especially the start of the playoff when they went Bama, Clemson, Bama, Clemson, Bama, Clemson.
Yeah. Well, it didn't happen that many times, but I get your point.
And then I got two other big questions. It seems to me the committee is carrying Utah's USC win a little too heavily. Am I right on that kind of
They're
thinking?
carrying
Or,
something for Utah that they value there that I don't value. That's a great win. That's
oh
one of
yeah,
the 10 or 15 best wins, probably higher than that in the country. It's a great win. But I don't know how you can play that on both sides in regards to if you're going to give Utah all this credit for beating USC, then you need to lessen the credit that you're giving USC for losing this nail biter, really close game to Utah.
right.
They're two really good teams that played a total toss-up game, but you've got to credit the winner. But you also have to evaluate the game, and the evaluation of the game in my sight is just toss them up. If anything, on the road, USC playing that close and considering a lot of circumstances in that game, I almost credit it as, well, USC faced all that. And if that game was played at the Coliseum, I'm thinking USC is better. But Utah won the game in reality.
That makes sense. I feel like
Beat a
for
good
them,
Oregon State team by 26 points. That would be their other big win. Utah.
I would only say if you play that game 10 times, which I know they don't do, it's probably like a 50-50, so 5 each, or maybe one gets 6, the other gets 4. I don't see it being like, oh, well, Utah got lucky and they played them 10 times. USC beat them 8 times. Like, no, Utah is decent enough. I could see them winning that game most of the time, or at least half the time anyway.
Sure.
My other big question for you, and sorry, I came in late, so sorry if you already touched on this. Is it harder to rattle CJ or JJ, and is rattling them one of the bigger keys to the game itself?
Well, I think there's a difference between being effective against a great quarterback and rattling them. So I think sometimes a quarterback doesn't play well because he's on his back half the time, or he's got a helmet in his ribs, like 3 out of every 4 passes. And we say, oh, well, he choked or he was rattled. Well, yeah, he was rattled. He was physically rattled trying to throw the ball downfield. I don't know if those guys are going to get psychologically rattled. The more likely candidate would be, of course, J.J. McCarthy, because he's never started in this magnitude of a game, and C.J. Stroud has. Although maybe C.J. Stroud, we could play master psychologist and say C.J. Stroud may have more pressure on him since he lost this game last year, and he's going to feel like, I need to win this game this year. And he carries a higher level of responsibility in the Ohio State offense than J.J. McCarthy does at Michigan.
Makes sense. So I remember the other night, people in the chat were talking about like SEC being better than Big Ten and Big Ten better than SEC. My honest opinion, diehard Ohio State and Big Ten Conference fan when it's non-con. Big Ten overall is not as good as the SEC.
Okay.
Because in my opinion, there are more teams that can carry the SEC. The only real teams that carry the Big Ten is State and Michigan. Now, yeah, you have some weird or different years where it's State, Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State, maybe Wisconsin, but
when you talk about carrying the conference, define what you mean by that?
Maybe carry is the wrong word to
So it
use,
sounds
but
like you mean like any of those teams can go out against anybody in the country and at least not beat anyone in the country, but at least show up and be competitive.
yeah, I feel like the SEC as a whole, maybe not their like bottom tier teams like Vandy, South Carolina. I feel like the SEC as a whole would be more competitive against anybody, / depending on who it is in the SEC,
Absolutely.
right out win the games. Where with the Big Ten, if you take that scenario, your only likely winners 9 times out of 10 is going to be Michigan and Ohio State. And like I said, sometimes it could be State, Michigan State, Penn State, maybe Wisconsin, but
yeah, you start to lose confidence in teams in the Big Ten once you get past. I'm going to throw Penn State out there as being somebody that can go out against almost any team in the country, excluding 4 or 5, and play them down to the wire, if not win the game. But then it really starts to go in the Big Ten.
like that's why I included Wisconsin. But that's kind of like,
No. Don't include Wisconsin this year. No.
Definitely not this year.
No. Where the SEC, yeah. If you get past Alabama, Georgia, who's next? Is it? And I don't even know if Alabama.
I think depending on who,
Tennessee, LSU, etc. Yep, it's a deeper conference at the top. Absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like yes, Alabama, yes, Georgia, and I don't say this because I like the real, but I think Kentucky, depending on the opponent, not this year. You lose to Vandy, you don't deserve that. Could do it, possibly, at least hang in there. LSU definitely, either way, either hang in there or win. I think the Florida State game was just a fluke, honestly.
Well, we're not going to go through the whole conference, but yeah. Anyway,
but you get my point.
SEC is the best conference. It's really not arguable, and I wish it was, because I would love to talk about that the entire off season. But it's not arguable unless we see something different in bowl season and in the playoffs that can create a great argument. Because I would love nothing more than to be here the entire off season and have arguments with people, because it is like impossible to figure out who the best conference is, who's second, third, fourth, and fifth. But that's not the case right now. All right, Buckeye Mike.
One last thing for you. So, since you mentioned the off season, what do you roughly typically do during the off season as far as like your videos?
For better explanation on that, you should go back like 9 months, go through all my videos, give them all like 1,000 views or so, and check it out. Yeah, we are talking college football all the time. We're ranking and rating and previewing and recruiting and everything. So that's what we've got. So we'll be here.
All righty. Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate you being here. All right, BGPO Football Funk. Then we go to Tony and Tim. Hey, DeAndre, how you doing?
Hey, Mark. It ain't gonna be long. Yeah, I know you can't tell me, because you can't think for other people. But
you know me too well.
Why is LSU and Alabama in front of Clemson and USC?
Okay, you want to? So
they're educated best. Yeah,
I think some of that's legitimate, and I think some of that's illegitimate. The legitimate part is that if you watch Alabama play and you look at the results, we have to consider that even though they struggled against Texas A&M, people forget this. They don't mention this. They struggled against Texas A&M without Bryce Young, okay? Also, they struggled against Texas. Yes. But on the other hand, let's also understand that this team is one play in 2 different games away from being undefeated and being the #1 team in the country.
Okay, no doubt. But your record is what they say it is. You know what I'm saying? That's what I have an issue with. And not about it being me being a Clemson fan. And I don't,
I'm sorry to cut you off, DeAndre, but I believe we're having the same conversation we had last week.
No. I'm about to go to something else.
You want all the 0-loss teams, then all the 1-loss teams, then all the 2-loss teams, and that's a valid approach.
Right.
That's your whole claim that Clemson's lost one game and USC's lost one game, so they should be higher than 2-loss teams. And I'm not saying that's invalid. I'm just saying I don't totally agree with it, but I understand the point.
Yeah, but my point also is Clemson beat the team that beat LSU. And everybody could say it's a fluke or whatever. They still lost the game. You played the game, you lost. You didn't make the extra point or whatever. You gave them 24 points.
Sure.
Just like Clemson. It doesn't matter if you play Notre Dame in the wind at 40 degrees. You gave up 285 yards. You lost the game. So you have a right to say that. Does Clemson deserve to make the playoff? No. Because if you're lost one game and your resume is not as good as the other teams, like if USC wins out, USC has the best resume between them, Clemson, and Alabama and Tennessee. And another thing I have an issue with LSU, y'all, not you, but people punish Clemson for losing the 21 points to Notre Dame on the road in the win, but nobody punishes LSU for losing the 23 points to Tennessee at home on a nice sunny day. That's what I have an issue with. It's the bias that those schools get away with. And I know you don't have nothing to do with it. It's just my comment when I hear people talk about who should win. Because I think if Clemson wins out and Michigan lose to Ohio State and USC lose another game, Clemson should go to be the 4th team. Just because USC will have 2 losses, all the other schools have 2 losses, and Michigan's schedule to me is not as good as Clemson is. Now I know people say, well, Clemson's schedule kind of fell off, but when they played those teams, NC State had Leary. They might play a USC team that had 11 wins, and I'm sure USC going to be Georgia Tech this weekend, and maybe they might beat NC State. But you're still playing a team that's going to be rated in the high 10. It doesn't make any sense to me how they do it. But I know you got to go to your other show, Mark.
No,
so I'm not going to.
You're fine. The only thing, BG, PO Football Funk, I always get caught up on that name there, DeAndre. So the only thing that I'll say is that I'm not going to hide behind the committee and just let you bash the committee and say, okay, yeah, did you see my rankings this week?
No, I didn't get a chance to see it.
Yeah, I'm ranking LSU and Alabama above Clemson and USC as well.
I disagree with you. I mean, and I understand you do more way analytics. You say eyeball test, but your record says what you are. And Clemson beat Florida State, that beat LSU, that beat Alabama. So, I mean, I don't get it. Now, does Clemson play terrible right now? Yes, they are.
I totally get your point. You want all the 0-loss teams, and then all the 1-loss teams, then all the 2-loss teams. That's how you like it done, and I get that point. I just don't agree with it. I believe that there should be evaluation of the teams and who they play.
Okay, but again, when Clemson played those teams, they were highly ranked. So they were 14. Outside of Alabama, who else has LSU? They beat Ole Miss. I can't use that argument. But I just disagree with it. They beat the team that beat LSU. So, I mean.
LSU also beat a Mississippi State team that's just as good as some of the teams that Clemson's beat at the top of their win list.
I totally agree with you. But they beat the team that beat them. I mean, I'm going to take it back to 2001. Ohio State had a couple comeback wins, go back to Tennessee even. Just because on that day that you win the championship, that don't mean you were the best team that whole year. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you get lucky breaks. Some teams just start playing well at a certain time. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes stuff just happens. It's one and done, and you lost that day. Everybody can say Ohio State was the best team. Miami was a better team than Ohio State, but when they stepped on the field in 2001, 2002, whenever it was, Ohio State won the game. I mean, that's how we play this game. It shouldn't be about, I think this, I think that. Clemson has one loss. Florida State. I mean, those other teams have 2 losses.
Hang on. It's my rankings are not about I think this and that. Obviously, my thought process has to come into it. So there is bias everywhere. I have bias,
I agree with you.
the committee is biased, but I take that out as much as possible. I think Alabama is even better than that. I think Alabama's a top 4 or 5 team. Like if you wanted me just to say, who do I think should be at the top of the rankings? Who do I think are the best teams? I'm dropping TCU down. They're like 7th or 8th. They're still a really good team. That's really good, 7th or 8th in the country. But I got them ranked number 2 based on resume. Do I think they're the second best team in the country? No, I don't.
Well,
That's how I try to take my thought process out of it, my own personal who would win this game. But I think TCU is the second best resume.
so, and I'm going to let you go, Mark. I know you got the other channel. But maybe let's put it like this. You got Georgia, Ohio State, TCU, and you got to have a 4th team. And Southern Cal get in there and beat everybody. At the end of the year, would you really say Southern Cal was the best team in all of college football? And they beat everybody that's up there now?
If they go to the playoffs and win 2 games?
Yeah.
Heck yeah. That will have shown me enough. If USC beats UCLA, Notre Dame, and let's say Oregon, and then goes to the playoffs and beats Ohio State and Georgia,
Okay.
I will say it doesn't matter what I saw. Those results that might be the greatest playoff run in the history of college football if they do that. UCLA, Notre Dame, Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia. Whoo! Yes, I will say hands down, this is the best team. I don't care if there were tipped passes and third string quarterbacks playing or who. That's an incredible run.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to see. But, yeah, all right, man. Take care.
Thanks for being here. All right. Speaking of USC, perfect segue into Tim, Tony, and Rick. The practically owners of our USC channel, USC Postgame, Pac-12 chat show on Wednesday night. And here they come. Boom. Tim, Tony, Rick. How are you guys doing tonight?
Hey, Mark. Good evening. Doing great.
How you doing?
I am doing well. I enjoy this each and every Tuesday night. We've got different layers to this, and you guys have added your spin, and everyone looks forward to seeing what you guys have compiled from the Voice of College Football community. So, Tony, take over.
All right. Well, this is from your community here. Once again, so we've got voters from Mark's Patreon community that represent every conference. So they are, there's folks from the ACC, there's folks from the Big 10, folks from the Big 12, Pac-12, SEC. Actually, I think Pac-12 is the least of the voters. So we compile it for Mark, but it is the least of the voters. So let's take a look at what we've got. Now, I think this is the best slate of games that we've seen of any of them that people have done the predictions on. Let's take a look at what we've got. So, number 1, Mark, your community said the best team in the country, they think, is the Georgia Bulldogs. Once again, well-deserved. They're looking great. Next, did DeReal just talk about Kentucky going to be voted in? No, DeReal, Kentucky is not going to be voted in. Okay, we can keep going. Whatever that was. Number 2, Michigan. So your voters put Michigan above Ohio State, but that's certainly going to be a great game because next up, they put Ohio State. But remember, guys, and before people ask this in the chat, as always, remember the top 4 seeds go to the top 4 conference champions. So Ohio State, as a non-conference champion, is down there at 5. Mark, then your folks put Tennessee and then TCU. So Tennessee is also going to be hosting one. TCU hosting the Cotton Bowl there. And then you put USC next. So that's your top 6 from your voters. And that gives you your 4 bowls there. And these are some good looking bowls. So let's see how else we fill this out. Alabama at 7, hosting a game in Tuscaloosa, and LSU at 8, hosting a game in Baton Rouge. Mark, I'll tell you, we looked at the numbers. Your voters do not respect this LSU getting blown out and losing to Florida State. I know you like it, but and there's some folks in the chat who do, but your voters generally do not respect LSU as much as they respect Tennessee, Alabama, Ohio State, USC, TCU, and Michigan. So we hate to deflect the SEC narrative on that, but oh well. Now then, you guys put Clemson at 9, so your voters continue to punish Clemson for what happened in South Bend. I think your voters are not real sympathetic to ugly losses. You guys put Utah at 10. You guys, and by the way, when you say you guys, this is you guys in the chat who are doing this. You guys put North Carolina at 11, giving them more love than the playoff committee is giving them. Then you're next out, because remember, the 12th slot has to make sure that at least one group of 5 team makes it. So Oregon and Penn State were the next 2 out. Very, very similar to what the committee said. And to the guy, okay, we just went over this. We got whoever said the idiotic comment of USC is not the 4th best team. No, that's because let's go on again about how the rankings work, guys. This is not rocket science.
Say it every week.
Conference champions get the top 4 seeds. Not a difficult concept. All right. Moving on then. Filling in the last slot, UCF right there. So there are some pretty great matchups here. So UCF has to go to Columbus. We know that Ohio State, they are incapable of like tying their shoes if it's windy. It'll be December, so I guess that'll be UCF in the Rose Bowl. Will Ohio State be able to play in the weather, or are they going to get more of that excuse like we got last time?
We're expecting UCF to play in the weather better than Ohio State. Okay.
I don't know. I heard from the Buckeyes about how Ohio State just can't play in the wind. So maybe there won't be wind.
Something tells me the Buckeyes will run the ball better than UCF.
Yeah, I think the Buckeyes are going to roll UCF. We're just teasing you, Buckeye fans. We're just teasing you. But these are some pretty awesome brackets here. Like that LSU Clemson game, I think Clemson probably wins that. Other people may think LSU wins that. And then they go play Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. And either one of those is an amazing matchup. That Utah's looking better. Utah versus Alabama. And then the winner plays Michigan and Miami. That'd be pretty fun. Tennessee, North Carolina. There will be no defense of any kind. The over-under will be about 140, and it'll be a pretty great game. And then the winner goes to play TCU in the Cotton Bowl. Like, that would be awesome. And then finally, the one that I love, we got UCF probably getting rolled by Ohio State, and then a USC-Ohio State Rose Bowl, old school style, in Pasadena. Like, how cool is that?
Wow.
So, guys, this is what the playoff will be like. And, I know Ari Wasserman wrote an amazing column about how much we lose from the playoff. We get this. This beats the Cheez-It Bowl 1, the Citrus Double Cheez-It with Spice Bowl, the Parmesan Cheez-It Bowl, whatever the new one's going to be. Like, this is great. So I think it's pretty exciting. What do you guys think?
I think Mark actually favors the Jimmy Kimmel Bowl, right, Mark? That's your favorite one?
Oh, yeah. Big fan of Jimmy Kimmel, of course. And yes, we did have a discussion about trying to pull together enough funds for the Voice of College Football Bowl. But that said, that LSU Clemson matchup, like, I think there's a decided favorite in the other 3, but that would be a heck of a game.
Yeah, it would, wouldn't it?
I got 2 points. First point is I think I heard DeAndre on the earlier call talking about Clemson. And obviously, with with the USC situation, again, as Tony mentioned, this is looking in real time, taking a look at the rankings that just happened on the college football playoff show from 1 to 25, and putting them in the format that is going to be used as soon as 2024, possibly. The difference being, again, is that they are valuing the 4 highest conference champions and giving them a bye. So, yes, I agree. Whoever said that in the chat, USC is absolutely not the 4th best team. Probably not the 7th best team.
Oh,
Okay?
it is.
So what they're doing is they're putting a value on winning your conference championship. So for instance, Tennessee is sitting at 5. They are not going to win their division, and they're not going to win the SEC. And there's a very good chance they can get in to the conference or into college football playoffs if enough teams lose. So what the presidents who established and approved this future 12-team college football playoff is saying, hey, we value the 4 conference champions from the 4 highest rated conferences. Now, obviously, they're not going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4 every year, ranked 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's why this looks different, okay? Because you win your conference championship in the 12-team playoff, you're going to get a bye, the four top teams. Second point that I like about this is now that we're moving, this is the 3rd week of having the college football playoff rankings. Things are shaking out. We're in week 10. Take a look at the games that just happened last weekend with the upsets, with Oregon losing to Washington and UCLA losing to Arizona. Look how big the rest of the season's going to be. That USC UCLA game, let's say this is 2024, would be huge because possibly USC gets knocked out of the playoffs and UCLA plays itself back in. Look at Oregon on the bubble, has to play Utah this coming week. So for those people that are saying, the 12-team playoff, it's everybody gets a trophy and it discounts the regular season, BS. Take a look. These games are going to matter because teams are going to try to work themselves into the 12-team playoff. Look at Penn State right there. Yes, they did lose to Ohio State and Michigan, but in a season where they lose to those 2 teams, they still have a chance to get themselves into the 12-team playoff. That's my take.
Yeah, Mike Fork, if SC and Ohio State played their averages, you're looking at probably about 89 for that over. So it's gonna be
real quick. One thing, because I'm seeing some comments in the chat, Jason. This is to you, but to everybody else. There's a misconception, I think, in the idea of what the playoff is, and what the president's goal of the playoff, and what everyone else's goal of the playoff is, and that is the playoff games are not designed for like you and your motorhome. Like they're designed for a national playoff TV product. And so like, if you're like, but my motorhome would have to be on the road for 3 straight weeks. Not picking on you, Jason. I'm talking, I hear this all the time. It's like, well, guys, guess what? Your mobile home in Mobile is not the goal of these games. The goal of these games is to create a national champion. And yet, yes, for 3 straight weeks, there are going to be games that teams will travel to. And that's what it is. That's the goal. The purpose of the playoff is to have a playoff, not to provide fans with a motorhome destination of the week. And Jason, I'm not picking on you, I promise. My motorhome has plenty of gas. Jason, yours I thought would be great. I don't know. You probably don't have a motorhome. You probably have an awesome convertible. But just that's the misconception, guys. I think that we have to shift a little bit too. And as we look at this, is it's not about necessarily having fans in the stands, because, for example, some of these games, these are kind of lined up in ways that would probably have lots of fans because of where they are. But I mean, hypothetically, like you think about the stadium in Miami, if it's Michigan, Utah, it's probably not going to be sold out. Just because there's you might not have 80,000 people that are going to go to that game. And that's the thing. It's becoming a bit more of a TV product. I mean, stadium will still be going off and a lot of fun, but it is a very much of a TV product. It's not corporate profits. It's TV product. So it's just something to think about. Real quick, do we want to look at the comparison?
Let's do it.
All right. So you guys, let's see how you can. Oops, sorry, I screwed that up. Let's see how I missed the Penn State thing. Let's see how you guys compare to the others. Sorry, guys. I was frantically fixing these animations while we were on there. 11 and 12. You guys in the community voted North Carolina over Penn State, but you both thought Oregon was 12. Matched up with Utah at 10. I'm really impressed continually by how our folks and their opinions, even though they vary a lot by individual ballot, average out to be pretty close to what the committee said. Clemson 9. LSU, obviously, like we said, community here respected LSU a little less than the committee. Alabama and USC, and then USC and LSU. So the voters, your voters, Mark, put USC as 6. I think waiting to see how they fare over the weekend. Above Alabama and LSU, I think your voters do not appreciate, based on what we saw with Oregon too, teams that lose big. And then the rest of them were pretty steady. Tennessee, TCU. Obviously, there was the flip of Ohio State and Michigan, and Georgia won. Yeah, Antoine, it's not that there's nobody there. It's just that they might not have 70,000 people there. And that's fairly normal. It's not that big a deal. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to go on a tangent. But just, it's a thing that we see a lot with, I keep seeing this like panic about like, but how will I go to the game? And it's like, well, maybe you won't go to all 3. But their games are awesome. So, and thank you again to everybody who voted in this. We appreciate it. It's kind of fun to see what you guys have to say.
You guys did a phenomenal job once again. Tony, we appreciate you getting the ballots out to everyone and collecting those, adding those up. Rick, for the brainchild of coming up with this awesome format and basically showing us the future through the present. And all 3 of you being champions for this at the Voice of College Football community and the USC channel and everything that you guys do for what we do here at the Voice of College Football, both on the main channel, the USC channel, and throughout all the channels. It's phenomenal.
Thank you. And we'll talk on Friday about UCLA. So the big we'll have final word from UCLA on Friday. So that'll be fun.
It'll be intriguing. Exactly. All right, guys. Anything else?
Thank you.
Hey, Mark.
Have a good evening. Thank you
so much. And we will take the rest of these calls. I see some folks that want to join. We will let you join the show here. Let me drop the link one more time. Let's take the next 4 or 5 calls, whatever's right here. We've got 3 calls on the line, and then if Daryl or anybody else wants to jump in as well. So let's get right to it. We've got Jackson on the line. Jackson, what's going on tonight, man?
What's up, Marcus? Going pretty good. How's it going with you, man?
Good. I'm good.
Now,
what hit you tonight?
Well, I saw where Buckeye Mike was talking about, Georgia being the new Bama, and you said you're not ready to say that yet. But I'm going to say it because of one factor.
Okay.
Scott Cochran being the new strength conditioning coach.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Since 2021. Now, Georgia has, and I forgot to bring this up last week. Now, Georgia is 37th in penalties per game in 2021, right? And this year, they've been 9th in penalties per game. So they're very disciplined on that. And I would say that's helped them quite a lot. And also about USC. Well, they have to score style points against UCLA, Notre Dame, and their Pac-12 title opponent.
Okay.
Will they have to, Mark?
Will they have to? Can you give me a little bit more of a narrative on what else is going to be out there that's going to be?
Well, because last Saturday, Tennessee, right, they were up 59-24 against Missouri. And in that final minute, they scored that last touchdown, made it 66-24.
Yeah.
Now, I'm thinking that the reason why they did that was to show the committee, hey, we're one of the best 4 teams. Let us in.
If we could know right now, Jackson, whether the committee was swayed by that touchdown at all, then that would tell me a lot. If the committee is swayed by Tennessee scoring a touchdown to get to 65 points against Missouri, then they need to be canceled and completely obliterated today. The committee needs to be blown up and destroyed even before this playoff starts. Because if they're factoring in touchdowns that are completely meaningless at the end of games, then we're in trouble.
Well, and TCU, right? They're unbeaten as of right now, and if they were to lose to Baylor, for example, which that's not going to happen, but if they did,
Yeah.
and they win the Big 12, and then you got USC, who's 12-1 as well. They win their conference. Does USC get in over TCU because of their blue blood status?
I hope not. Again, I can't answer that. There's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there that believe that that's the case. I'm not necessarily one of them because I haven't seen it in the past. But if you're evaluating USC against TCU, I think it's an extremely close comparison. TCU would have the worst of the two losses, but
Yeah.
could be argued that they've got the better wins. We'd really have to line them up. They're close.
The better offense. So there's that. And
TCU's got the better offense than USC.
well,
Yes,
let's
we do.
but
Without Travis Dye, maybe.
and Tennessee, LSU. Now I heard some people say that LSU would get in over Tennessee because if they were to win the SEC, for example.
Yeah.
Would they get in over Tennessee, or would it be quite a conundrum because Tennessee still has that 40-13 victory in Baton Rouge?
Absolutely. So for me, Tennessee needs to be in before LSU because they're going to have one less loss. They play in the same conference, and they blasted them in Death Valley. However, the committee's going to have a huge conundrum because they've got the LSU trump card is we're the SEC champion, and we just beat Georgia, the team that everybody thinks is the best team in the country. We just beat them.
Yeah.
And Georgia's got the huge win over Tennessee and advanced to the conference championship game. Tennessee's got what you just outlined over LSU. They've got a huge conundrum.
Yeah.
Because you almost can't enter one without entering all three.
Yeah. I think this is why we need the 18 playoff now.
Yeah.
But for the Big Ten West Division, I found a little stat for Purdue, Iowa, and Illinois.
Okay.
And this is what they need to do in order to clinch their division. Now, Purdue has to beat both Northwestern and Indiana, and they need Iowa to lose to either Minnesota or Nebraska.
Yeah, I'm looking at everything right here. You're killing my video for tomorrow that I was going to do, but keep going, Jackson. That's all right.
Iowa has to beat Minnesota and Nebraska.
Yeah.
They need Illinois to lose to Michigan or Northwestern, but
yeah,
let's be honest here. Illinois is going to get shellacked in the big house.
Yep.
Illinois has to win both games against Michigan and Northwestern, and they need Purdue to lose to Northwestern or Indiana. And finally, we got Minnesota. They have to beat Iowa and Wisconsin, and they need Illinois to lose one of their two games, and they need Purdue to lose one of their two games in order to clinch the West Division. And they're going to have to play the winner of Michigan, Ohio State, which, let's be real here, Michigan, Ohio State is the Big Ten title game.
Yeah.
And do you think that scenario will be fixed if we can get USC, UCLA into the Big Ten West? Have like a little Ohio State USC matchup?
Yeah. So what I think I would do, and again, all these things, if you're really doing this in real life, then you have boards and charts and you go through history and you run different scenarios to make sure you're not missing anything. So we're just sitting here spitballing. But the way I would most likely do it is I'm going to take Purdue and I'm going to move them to the Big Ten Eastern Division because they have a rivalry with Indiana. It's the only game in the Big Ten that's protected cross division because they protect that rivalry. Might as well move them in the same division, add USC and UCLA to the Big Ten Western Division, and you've balanced it out somewhat. I still think that the East is better, but I think geographic sense needs to come into play and continue as well.
Yeah.
I do think it would be interesting if this expansion continues, and let's say we've got, whether that's Notre Dame and Oregon or Oregon and Washington. I put together a 16 team with Oregon and Washington that really balances things out. Then you've got a West Coast pod, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA. You've got, I put it into 4 quadrants that are almost perfectly balanced in terms of both geography and competition. But for right now, that's what I would believe. That's what I would do.
So let's see. Let's see. Ohio State, Michigan State, and who else would be in that pod?
Penn State, Purdue, Indiana, Rutgers.
Let's see. Yeah, Rutgers, Maryland.
Yeah.
I guess Purdue.
Yes.
Yeah. And Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Iowa.
Yeah. Northwestern, UCLA, USC.
And Illinois.
Yeah.
So there we go.
I proposed that to our Iowa guy, Corey, last night, and he was all caught up on Purdue being too good to move to the East, and you should move Northwestern. But anybody who's restructuring a league, you don't get caught up in like what's going on right now. Northwestern was a much better football team than Purdue like 2 years ago. So I wouldn't get too caught up in just thinking that Purdue's just this team that's going to contend and Northwestern's a complete dumpster fire. That's what's going on right this second.
Yeah. Yeah, those seniors are going to, eventually, there's going to be more seniors, and, you're going to see same surprise team that you did from like 2018, 2020 with Northwestern. Oh, and here's some anniversary dates coming up for college football fans.
Okay.
Friday will be the 55th anniversary of the game of the century between USC and UCLA.
Okay.
And Sunday will be the 40th anniversary of the play between Cal and Stanford. And, ironically, USC, UCLA are going to play each other on Saturday, and Cal Stanford will play each other on Saturday
Nice.
at 4:30 on the Pac-12 network. Oh, rats. I hope I didn't. Oh, USC, UCLA will be on 7 p.m., and I believe it's going to be on Fox, the network that brings you The Simpsons and Family Guy.
Are you here to do like promotions for the networks? Is that part of your role, Jackson? Are you getting paid under the table or something?
No, I don't have any money out of it.
Okay.
I just remember the dates for the games. It's like, oh man, everybody's got to know. But thank you for having me on, Mark.
Appreciate you being here, Jackson. Have a good night.
I'll see you again next Tuesday.
Sounds good, man. All right, let's keep it going. We've got Jeffrey coming up here. Jeffrey, what's going on?
Hey, I haven't called in a little while because I've been very busy doing stuff with the guys or whatever on all the live streams and stuff. But yeah, I had an argument with it wasn't really an argument, but it was a slight disagreement with Tony over the playoff, where if in this scenario, if Michigan loses to Ohio State and you have Georgia wins out, Ohio State wins out, so they're 1 and 2, TCU wins out and they're 3rd, then if you had a 1-loss Tennessee and USC wins out and they only have 1 loss, and then you have the Michigan with 1 loss, he told me, he said that USC would get in over Tennessee. And I said, in my opinion, I know I'm not a committee voter, I know they take the championship game into account, but I said that judging by usually the fact that they go with the SEC harder, and even though the Pac-12 has been better, I said, in my opinion, they would pick Tennessee over USC. And Tony did not like that. He said that, well, you're not a commissioner or not a committee voter. I'm like, I know that. I'm just saying, in my opinion. What do you think about that?
All right. If that happens, Tennessee has lost to Georgia and USC has lost to Utah. Okay, let's look at their wins. Tennessee will have beaten Bama and LSU. Who else matters? They beat Florida. Who knows how they're going to finish? Maybe 8-4. They beat Kentucky. What do they finish? 7-5, 8-4. Anybody else that counts on Tennessee's? They beat Pitt. They're probably going to finish like 7-5. Anybody else for Tennessee that's any good on their resume?
Probably not.
Okay.
I mean, Missouri doesn't really count.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know that the committee's really going to get into that deep on it, but USC will have beaten best wins probably. Let's say they beat Oregon or Utah in the championship game, and then they also beat. I guess their second best wins probably UCLA, and then Notre Dame. And who have they beaten already that's any good? I guess Oregon State's their best win right now. But nothing else past that. Yeah, does USC have another decent win besides Oregon State? That's it right now. All right. So we can really see that. But Tennessee's beaten Alabama, LSU, Florida, Kentucky, Pitt. USC's beaten Oregon, UCLA, Notre Dame, Oregon State. Well, Tennessee's got a better resume. USC's got a closer loss, but to not as good a team. Of course, Tennessee lost to Georgia, just like everybody's losing to Georgia. But USC's got a conference championship. So the committee's going to let us know if they favor conference champions or if they favor an overall resume. And they've shown us in 2016 and 2017 that they will take in 2020, that they'll take the resume.
So that means Tennessee more than likely in that scenario over USC. And I just said to Tony, I was like, in my opinion, I would say Tennessee would get in because the SEC, they have one loss to the best team in the country, perceived. And then he was upset. He was like, oh, USC would get in their conference. I'm like, yeah, but it's Tennessee. It's the SEC. I mean, they're going to put Tennessee over USC, in my opinion. That's not set in stone, but obviously. But that scenario might not even happen because if TCU loses, then it won't matter.
Well, the committee's supposed to be taking like this very deep into the process. Like they are supposed to be studying like all these games. And what they're also going to come up with USC is they looked pretty awful against Cal. They looked pretty awful against Arizona State. They looked pretty awful against Arizona. They played bad teams close. Those are three bad teams. They played them close. Tennessee doesn't have any about the worst mark on Tennessee, and this is not a bad mark. They went to Pitt. They won in overtime. That Pitt team is right now 6-4. Their last two games are like Louisville and Miami. Let's say they finish 7-5 or 8-4. That's not going to be a boost to their resume, but it's also not going to be a weight on their resume in a negative way.
I think that's a really good point about the fact that USC has struggled, and I think I might have mentioned that too. That the fact that USC has not looked very good lately. I know they blew out Colorado, but it's Colorado. I mean, USC has kind of struggled. And I mean, I did mention, obviously, you don't know what's going to happen. USC could easily win out, but odds are they're not going to. And TCU is probably not going to either. It could happen, but both teams have struggled really badly against rough teams. I mean, if Texas was just competent, they would have beaten TCU. TCU's almost lost several times. I mean, they could easily win out, and if they win out, they're in. But they're not one of the four best teams. And that's what people don't understand about teams anyway, is that like TCU is not the fourth best team in the country. They're only there because they're undefeated and they should be there, but they're not the fourth best team. It just is what it is.
Well, that's what's funny about the committee's own mission statement about what they're doing is if TCU wins all of its games, they should be in the playoff, no doubt. Are they the fourth best team in the country by most people's judgment? No. but the committee's still going to put them, rightfully so, in the playoff. But
They
then on
should.
the other hand, the committee will say, we select the 4 best teams in the country. And the committee even says this, which this is a crock, but they say this, that they don't even look at the conferences. They don't care if they all come from one conference or 4 different conferences or whatever it is, that they don't even consider conferences in regards to where we want to split this up. So the place where the committee may get caught up and really have an issue, and this may either help or screw Tennessee one way or the other, is think of it this way. If LSU beats Georgia, then how does the committee break up and decide between LSU, Georgia, and Tennessee after LSU's a 2-loss SEC champion that just beat Georgia? Georgia's the consensus number 1 that just lost an SEC championship game and easily beat Tennessee, but Tennessee beat LSU and has a better record than LSU and beat them by 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. How is the committee going to get out of that? Like with selecting 1 or 2, if not all 3, if they almost all have to come together. But
the only way that would not happen, the only way that would not happen, if what you said happens, the only way they wouldn't all get in is if TCU is undefeated and Ohio State is undefeated. Then one of them is left out.
I don't think that they all should be selected, but I don't know how to separate those 3. They all have something on the other team. Like if you just select Georgia and Tennessee, well, LSU's like, we won the SEC championship game and we beat Georgia. And if you don't select Georgia, they say we were the most dominant team in college football the entire season, and we've got the best resume still with 1 loss. And we just beat the team that you just took, Tennessee. We beat them by 2 touchdowns, and it really wasn't even that close. And then Tennessee, if you leave them out, they say we only lost 1 game. LSU lost 2, and we beat them by 4 touchdowns in Death Valley.
Well, a lot of people forget too that Auburn that one year had 2 losses, and they were going to make the playoff if they hadn't lost to Georgia in the SEC championship game. So that was very well possible that year. So again, it depends on how it breaks out. But if TCU loses and Michigan loses Ohio State, it's very well possible LSU could sneak in the back door. It'd be crazy, but yeah. And another thing that kills me too is that like last year you had Cincinnati and made the playoff. And a lot of people talk to me about, well, UCF, why didn't UCF make it? Well, that was different because UCF's resume was weaker. Cincinnati had the Notre Dame win. And if Oklahoma State had have beaten Baylor, Oklahoma State would have been in the playoff over Cincinnati with 1 loss. No doubt about it at number 4. So, and Notre Dame had the loss to Cincinnati, which is why they didn't put them in. But a lot of people don't understand that the committee doesn't care about the smaller teams. They don't care. Like, again, TCU is going to make the playoff if they win out, but they have to win out. But if they don't, they're finished. And again, in my opinion, if it comes down to Tennessee and USC in that 4-spot scenario, I think they're going to pick Tennessee. But it's really crazy to see what's going to happen. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it's going to shake out. But it's very interesting because there's a lot of teams right now that are in contention still, but couple slip ups by the not as talented teams in the other conferences, you could easily somehow have a 3-team SEC playoff somehow. If everything broke wrong, it would be weird. It'd take a lot for that to happen, though.
Well, what about this? This isn't that unlikely. USC loses. Pac-12's out. They lose any game. North Carolina loses to NC State. That's a pick'em game. That's a toss-up for the most part. And then they beat Clemson in the ACC championship game. The ACC's out. Ohio State, Michigan is a 2-score game. There's 1 team in. And then, TCU loses. And what you've got left are 3 teams from the SEC, and you've got Ohio State or Michigan.
I mean, it could happen. I mean, like I said, it'd take a lot, but I can definitely see it. And that's the unfortunate thing. because you know, like Darrell and the SEC guys that want that to happen. You know, that's like a fantasy, but it could happen. I mean,
I don't want it to happen,
me
but
neither.
it's feasible. It's probably not going to happen. LSU, I don't believe, is going to beat Georgia for one thing.
No.
And TCU's possibility of going undefeated, I still think it's against them. I think they still have to go through too much, but they cleared the biggest hurdle, I guess. Texas, Kansas State, it's close, but they got to beat Kansas State again. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that the Texas argument, like I picked Texas to beat TCU, and again, like I said, if they had to just play competently, then they would have beaten TCU. That was my dad. We turned that game on, and my dad was like, "This is one of the most boring games I've ever watched in my life for supposedly a big game." It's like, yeah, because both teams aren't good. They're not that good on that level. That's what I told him.
Well, it was expected to be an offensive game, and it was a defensive game.
So yeah, my dad likes watching games that are like, you know, high quality, like Alabama, Ole Miss. He likes, you know, obviously he loves Alabama, but like watch that game. He's like, this is a good game right here. I'm like, well, Dad, it's the SEC. Alabama's going on the road. It's Lane Kiffin. He wants to be Alabama. That's why it's a good game. TCU, Texas. Texas is not back. They're struggling, and TCU is, you know, a good team, but they're not forced. So this is what you get, Dad. It's like,
So just to play devil's advocate, when TCU and Oklahoma State get together and they go to overtime, is that a good game because the conference is good versus when LSU and Tennessee play and it's a 4-score game and it's a lousy game, then the SEC is not a good conference? I can name a ton of SEC games this year that were lousy games.
That's a good point. I mean, that's a good point. I just think he kind of like he looks at it from the point of, you know, like, oh, if the SEC is a close game, it's because both teams' defenses are really good. If it's the Big 12 and it's low scoring, it's just because the team sucks.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Okay, so he puts his spin on it.
Yeah.
Because if your dad's just looking for good games, you know, he should probably be watching more football on like Thursday and Friday night with like, you know, the American Conference, and if he wants to see a bunch of 42-38 games.
Yeah, we did watch like the ECU Cincinnati. We watched some of the third. I like watching all those games. I'm trying to get my dad to watch more of them because he used to just be the guy that watched like the top games, but it's like now he's like, man, these smaller games are pretty good. You know, it's like, I'm like, Dad, I mean, it's good football because I mean, a lot of these teams' defenses aren't that great. The scores can get high and crazy stuff happens. And I mean, there's not a lot of stakes involved. So it's just, and it doesn't matter who wins really. It's just, it's funny. I mean, there's no scenarios. Like we're watching LSU Arkansas. My dad's like, man, I want LSU to go down so Alabama can still have a chance to make the SEC championship game. It's like, Dad, I don't want to watch this game and there be stakes involved. ECU Cincinnati, it's like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Even though we're from North Carolina, it doesn't really matter. It's like we're just having fun watching it. So that's my thing.
Are you saying that the American Conference Championship doesn't matter?
Well, to him, it doesn't matter who wins. We can just watch the game and it don't matter. And there's no stakes. No, it doesn't matter who to root for is my point. We can just have fun watching it. It's like, you know, I don't have to hear the whole time, please come on, Arkansas. If only KJ Jefferson was healthy, you know, LSU would have gone down. It's funny.
All right.
Yeah.
I'd love to watch a game with your dad sometime.
Oh, he's awesome, man.
All right. You should bring him on here sometime. We can get his philosophy on these games.
Yeah, for sure. He'd probably be a glorified Darrell MVP for sure.
Okay. We only need so many Darrell MVPs.
Nah, he's all right. He likes other conference. I'm just messing around. But yeah, I'm glad I got to call in tonight, and I'll try to call in soon again. Thanks for having me on, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen in the playoff race. It's going to be interesting.
Appreciate you being here, Jeffrey. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Last but not least, there he is, the real MVP.
How you doing, Mark?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great this evening.
Okay.
Shout out to Jeffrey. He's an Indiana fan, right?
Yes.
But I'm sure since he's talked about 3 SEC teams potentially making the playoffs, that means he's just an SEC homer mark. Because anytime any 3-team SEC scenario is mentioned, you're automatically an SEC homer. Isn't that the way it works?
Well, I guess
regardless of how realistic or unrealistic the scenario is.
I guess I have fallen into that category because I've talked about it tonight.
Yeah, I trust me, I get that. Mark, I got the playoff, their playoff, the Patreon playoff.
Yes.
Mark, if the goal is to have great TV and see uniforms we normally don't see get on the same field,
yeah,
then the second part will definitely be achieved. The first part, probably not. Alabama, Utah, Mark, the gap between those two teams. If Alabama and Utah is hyper-focused in a playoff mode, I believe in playoff mode, teams amplify their differences. And that's why we see tons of blowouts. Would you agree with that?
Yes, that's been the history. Yes.
Okay. Now, Alabama is more talented than Utah, significantly, sure. Right?
Yes.
Okay. I've got a list of SEC teams. I've got the list pulled up from 24/7 Sports.
All right.
Missouri, according to 24/7 Sports, is more talented than Utah. Missouri.
Okay. They're not a better team.
But do you understand my point that I'm trying to make?
I understand your point. And those recruiting rankings, they're extremely meaningful, but they start to dissipate in meaning at a certain point.
Okay, if you're 1 and you're 33, okay, like what 24/7 has for Alabama, Utah, that's got to matter.
Oh, that's significant. Yes.
Right. So, and I honestly think Alabama would win by 40. 4-0. Listen, in most scenarios, it would not be 40. But in this scenario, where it is a playoff game, Alabama is going to be hyper-focused on Utah. Their entire world is Utah, Utah, Utah. Okay. I think they would just dominate the game.
You have certain evidence to support that, but there's other evidence that says not quite to that degree. I would not expect Alabama to beat Utah by 40 points. Not this Alabama team.
Okay, well, okay. Would you at least say it's more than 21?
I think it's probably in that range. If Alabama and Utah played right now on a neutral site in a playoff game, I'm going to say that game's in the 34-17 range.
I don't think the game will be competitive past the first quarter in this hypothetical game.
Okay.
Because, listen, playoff games, from what I have seen, there's just a gap. If this was a week 3 game, Utah, I think, would have a much better chance. But since these are playoff games, I have to evaluate it from what I've seen from past playoff games.
Yeah. And your opening statement is true. If you go through the playoffs, there are teams that obliterated other teams, and it seems to not make a whole lot of sense because that team that won the game played a whole lot of lesser teams during the regular season and didn't win by the margin that they won in the playoff. Because you're right, the playoff is an amplifier. It's an amplifier of talent and intensity.
Right. And when you have that significant of a gap, and Alabama's got the better head coach, they got the better staff, they have the better players, they're going to have home field advantage. I don't see an area where Utah would have an advantage in that game. It reminds me a lot of...
They have individual players that have an advantage.
Right, but as a collective unit,
tight end is an All-American.
Right, but I'm talking about from unit standpoint. I think Alabama, if you checked off Alabama, it'd be Alabama across the board. And it reminds me a lot of the Georgia-Oregon game, where before the game kicked off, I thought, man, Georgia's got basically an advantage in every single category. maybe outside of like one or two categories. And that's what I'm expecting from Alabama and Utah if they play. Now, of course, it's all hypothetical.
Yeah.
So it probably won't
Nothing
be.
we say here can be proven.
Right.
But we need to have some logical discussion based on evidence.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to bring. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic about it. And there is some evidence, like Utah played an SEC team this year. One of the bottom half SEC team, right, Mark?
Yes.
If you look at the standings. And it was a 50-50 game.
Yes.
That's not exactly a great sign for that team.
No.
Right.
And Oregon, who might be still the best team in the Pac-12, they're certainly, it's razor thin between the top 5 now with Washington to a certain extent. At least it appears that way. We'll see what happens in the next 3 weeks. It appears to be razor thin. Oregon lost by 46 points to the best team in the SEC.
Yeah. And the other games, Ohio State plays UCF. Mark.
Oh my goodness.
Mark, come on.
62-21, something like that.
Yeah, I think
59,
Ohio State
17.
is in the name that score type of game.
Yeah.
I mean, UCF being the best group of 5 team shows, in my opinion, shows why the group of 5 does not need a spot at all.
USC or UCF got killed by somebody this year, somebody who's not even any good. I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, UCF.
Like Memphis or not Memphis, I forget. Somebody beat them that's not that good.
Well, the group of 5 doesn't have a great team this year. They lost to East Carolina by 21 points.
Yeah, that must be the game I'm thinking of.
Yeah, their only other loss was to Louisville. So.
Yeah, we're allowing teams in the playoffs that lost to Louisville. Like if any of us talked about Louisville being in the playoff, what would the response be? We would be laughing about it. But
it's not only that, Mark.
Might be better than UCF.
It's not that. It's UCF has I would argue, has a better chance currently to make the playoff in the 12-team scenario than an LSU or Alabama or Clemson. Like, it's crazy to me. That's just crazy.
Well, I don't agree with that, but.
Well, UCF, all they have to do is win the American Conference, and they're automatically in. Alabama's struggling.
To it. But
Clemson has North Carolina.
But if we look at Clemson, you're talking about this specific season, but overall, Alabama would be making a 12-team playoff every year, and Clemson would be as well.
No, not every. I'm talking about right now. Like right now. In this moment in time. I'm not talking all time or anything like that. But if LSU loses to Georgia, is a 3-loss SEC team making it in? Probably not. Clemson loses to North Carolina, 2-loss Clemson team that hasn't looked particularly good this year against the likes of Syracuse and Wake Forest. Are they making it in? Probably not. And Alabama, I mean, everybody tells me they could have 5 losses, so it's not feasible. They lose to an Auburn. So I don't think the statement's wildly out there. Then the other game, Mark, we got Tennessee, North Carolina. I know it's going to be a track meet. Drake might have 500, 600 yards in the game, but Tennessee might post 1,000 yards in that game. I mean, UNC's defense, has it improved throughout the entire season?
It's hard to tell. I believe it has, but not enough for it to matter.
Right. I mean, what's UNC's best wins? Duke? Wake Forest?
It's either Duke or Wake Forest, whoever you consider to be better from those two.
And we're talking about they're in the hypothetical 12-team playoffs.
Yeah, they have beaten the 40th or 45th best team in the country. That's their best win.
Yeah. What about Ole Miss, Mark? If you replaced Ole Miss for UNC, which team do you think? Ole Miss or Penn State? Because I want the best teams in, and I think those two teams are better than UNC.
Oh, they are. Yes.
But this isn't about.
We saw Ole Miss play Alabama Saturday, and it was a great game.
Right. But this isn't about having the best teams. This is about representation for the first round. Because after the first round, it's most likely going to be the SEC and Big Ten dominating.
We will all see it play out starting in what, 2020? Do we have to wait till 2026?
Currently, that's what they're saying. I don't think it's moved to 2024.
Yeah, it's too bad.
And what do you mean it's too bad? Oh my gosh. I don't want to see 40-point games. I know everybody wants to see.
I want to see this now. You don't want to see Ohio State and USC play a second round playoff game?
I don't.
Or Michigan go to Alabama and play?
That might be the only good game. Do we want to see a rematch of Georgia LSU? Or Georgia Clemson? Tennessee TCU? I don't want to see those games. I want to see good competitive football games.
Tennessee TCU.
Probably 17, 21-point game.
That's got, I'm thinking that's like a 52-40.
No, I mean, it would be high scoring, but I just don't see the competitiveness of these playoff games, as most people are saying. I think maybe it's just me that thinks the SEC is way out there compared to every other conference, but it's not like the SEC's won the most national championships this millennium. They have the best players. They've had the most NFL draft picks. They have the best coaches, the best facilities. Can't be any of that, Mark. It's got to be.
I will say this, though. Let's say everything that you are stating is true. I do not believe that it is college football's mission or purpose or its role to try to figure out how to raise leagues and teams and programs to the level of the elite, to figure out how to balance this out. It is the responsibility of college football to present the best possible playoff format for representation for everyone and let the chips fall where they may. And if the SEC wins 8 consecutive years and its teams never lose any playoff games except for when they play each other, so be it.
Yeah, I think my solution to that and your solution just happen to be different, though. Because I think expanding the playoffs will amplify it. Whereas I have a feeling you think it'll mitigate it.
No, I don't think it'll mitigate it. My point is that if college football made me commissioner and I couldn't do anything to help certain conferences or institutions bolster their football programs, but I was simply in charge of scheduling and building a playoff system, my thought would not be, okay, how can I weight down the SEC to make it hard for them? And how can I prop up these other conferences? My thought process would be simply, what is the most fair and equitable playoff system that I can build? And it's not my responsibility to tell the ACC to be better or the SEC not to be as good. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to make a structured playoff format that is inclusive for champions across the sport to be represented and conferences to be represented. And if some conferences aren't up to it, then they're going to get embarrassed.
Yeah, well, I like the +1 model because all conferences will have some representation in some form or fashion.
Yeah, on New Year's Day. Yeah.
Yeah, they would all have some form of representation. Now, some would have more than others. Same with this, but I think it would make it to where you wouldn't see these complete blowouts, and it would be the inevitable. Like LSU Clemson's a perfect example of this. I think that could be a phenomenal game. That might be the only close game. I also think it's probably the most irrelevant game on the bracket because the winner of that game gets to play Georgia.
Yeah.
I don't see any scenario where either of those teams beat Georgia.
Sure.
So, and from that standpoint, it's like, well, you win that bowl game, but you get to lose to Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, you get the honor of losing by 30 to Georgia. because Georgia gets the bye. They're first off, we all agree they're the better team. They get the bye. They get the film on you. They'll have every advantage.
Yep.
And then LBC Trojan, I've been reading some of the chat, and he said, then let the SEC play in a 12-team tournament. Where's the fear? There is no fear. But the thing I'm worried about, Mark, is, anytime you have something not go the way I think people want it, you know what the solution is? You just keep expanding it. Just keep expanding it. So I have a feeling we'll get to 12, and then it'll be 24, then 36, then 68, then it'll be 128. And it'll just get to a point like it's March Madness, and the only thing we're talking about is the tournament.
Well, that's not going to be the case.
I don't know that for sure.
No,
there's people talking about expanding March Madness to under 28.
The physical aspect of football won't allow it. So you know we are hitting. It might go to 16 someday, but somebody call me out if it ever gets past 16, because I'm telling you, it will never get past 16 teams.
I never say never, Mark. I think 32 is on the table for the future.
No.
All right. And then if we do have this 12-team playoff, is people going to – I don't think people will stop complaining or saying that the SEC bias and all that stuff with the representation. I think people just don't like seeing the SEC win. I think that's the real underlying goal. But I'm pretty sure 32 teams will happen in my lifetime, Mark.
Okay.
And we're already
this
is already a huge step there. So it's unfortunate, but it just is what it is. Mark, thank you for bringing up the 3-team SEC scenario. Thank you for just putting that in people's subconscious for me.
I just answer questions when I just provide my feedback. I didn't bring it up, but people gave me scenarios and I said, this is what we're looking at.
Yeah. Well, maybe next year, Mark, we'll have a 4-team SEC scenario. I was really going to try shooting if Ole Miss was going to beat what was that, LSU?
Alabama.
No, LSU. They were 7-0 before they played Bama.
Well, that would have knocked out. Anyway, go ahead.
Because I was going to have it where Ole Miss had a loss, Alabama had a loss, Georgia had a loss, and Tennessee all had one loss at the end of the season. Yeah. That would have been beautiful. But unfortunately, Ole Miss hasn't lived up to the scenario. I'm not doing a 5-team SEC scenario this season, but there are 5 SEC teams that should have a shot in a 12-team scenario.
Yeah, if it were this season, sure. Because, you would have the 3, Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, then you would have Alabama and Ole Miss for right now, the committee had Ole Miss at 14. Yeah, I've got them a few spots higher than that.
How they're behind Utah, I don't understand.
They missed it on Ole Miss. They must not have watched the game on Saturday.
Ole Miss is a quality team.
Yeah,
I still don't understand Utah at 10. That makes no sense to me. I have no explanation why Utah's at 10. Utah's a quality team. But 10? I think they're closer to Washington than they are USC. I know it's a 1-point game, but just based on the total resume.
Yeah, I don't see it. I saw them play UCLA, and the game wasn't that close. They got whipped by UCLA.
Yeah, I know. In the Rose Bowl in front of – how many people do you think were there to watch that spectacular game?
Well, I was watching it, so.
I was too. That's all that matters, Mark. Well, anyway, good luck to Ohio State this week. Good luck to everybody, Mark. I think there might be 2 undefeated teams playing next week. And that, from what I've heard, should be a pretty good game. So,
yeah, we are all looking forward to it. All right, DeReal.
Yeah, hit the like and subscribe button. Hopefully Kentucky does something other than get dominated, Mark. But congrats to Georgia. You got a heck of a team. Please don't injure us.
All right. The Real wraps it up for us tonight. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. We will be back a number of times on Wednesday, meaning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with Ohio State Live. We've got Oklahoma Live at 12:30, Michigan, Florida State, and Miami at 5, 6, and 7 Eastern Time. I am going to look at a number of scenarios with the college football playoff and maybe come up with a video there. Big Ten Western Division scenarios and power rankings. We have knocked out the ACC and the Big Ten. Should I get to the rest of them? We shall see. It is lawfully late, but thank you. Of course, Nick here, who says, thanks, Mark, for the Chris Gamble reference. His highlights were awesome. Also, shout out to Steve Bellisari for that beautiful left-handed flick of the wrist. Reminds me a bit of Michael Penix. Okay, Nick, you would need to see Steve Bellisari play even more football. He doesn't compare to Michael Penix, but yeah, he could fling it downfield, but had no idea where it was going most of the time. All right. Appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for your support and for being here all the time. We'll be back all day on Wednesday right here at the Voice of College Football.